Mr. Speaker, of the 14 construction sites where the fatalities occurred in the second half of 2024, 9 were issued with stop work orders because their safety management systems were found to be inadequate, posing imminent danger to their workers. These work sites were required to undertake measures such as reviewing their safety management systems before they can resume work. None of the 14 work sites had previously been issued with stop work orders. I share the members' concern about the increase in workplace fatalities, especially in the construction sector. While the sector's workplace safety and health performance is better than those of many developed countries like Japan, we are not yet on par with top performers like the Netherlands. There is certainly scope for the construction sector to do better. MOM has continued to tighten our enforcement efforts for the construction sector. In 2024, more than 3,000 inspections were conducted, targeting key concerns such as working at height, vehicular safety, and struck by falling objects. More recently, we instituted a safety timeout in November 2024 to refresh workers' awareness of WSH practices and reinforce the importance of adhering to safety protocols. To improve industry-level workplace safety and health outcomes, the Multi-Agency Workplace Safety and Health Task Force, what we know as MAST, which includes partners such as MND, BCA, and WSH Council Industry Committees, has also introduced several measures to enhance workplace safety and health standards in the construction sector. Now, these include subjecting all public construction projects to the safety disqualification framework, which temporarily bars contractors with poor WSH performance from tendering. And we also require all construction work sites with contract values of $5 million and above to install video surveillance systems. The requirements for external safety audits to be conducted following serious lapses remain in effect even after the heightened safety period. To strengthen accountability at the leadership level, we have also instituted measures such as requiring chief executives and board of directors in higher risk sectors, including construction, to attend the top executive WSH program. Overall, our fatality rate has fallen over the years, averaging 1.1 per 100,000 workers, and is among the top performers worldwide. However, construction fatalities remain overrepresented in Singapore, with almost half of our fatalities coming from the construction sector. So the companies and the workers in the sector can certainly do better. On our part, we will monitor the progress of the measures implemented to further improve safety and accountability. I urge all employers and workers to remain alert as we approach the Chinese New Year period, which is typically a time when companies face time pressures to complete projects. MOM will continue with the enhanced enforcement efforts during this period. We must not compromise on safety, and it is our collective responsibility to ensure that every worker returns home safely.
Thank you, SMS, for your reply. While I appreciate SMS' reply on the multi-agency approach for safety timeout, my question is more on the effectiveness, or at least increasing the effectiveness of the safety timeout. In the MOM website, during a safety timeout, companies are strongly urged to review their risk assessment and debrief their workforce. Can I suggest that during the safety timeout, companies are required to review their risk assessment, the safety management system, and required to acknowledge that they have done so, especially at the leadership level, whether it's from the directors and within the company itself, flow it down with their workers acknowledging that they have been debriefed and they are sure of the safe practices that's required. Thank you.
Well, I thank the member for his questions. Indeed, the safety timeout that was done was voluntary because this was meant to complement MOM's enforcement efforts overall. As you know, in terms of effectiveness, the safety timeouts on its own is not going to be the panacea to solve, the fatality issues. But having said that, we've also done more extensive measures, all introduced just last year, For example, requiring companies with projects above $5 million to put video surveillance systems. I think that puts a lot of companies on notice because they know that if something happens, there is record, there is video surveillance that is there as evidence for everyone to investigate, for example. So that, I think, has deterred many companies in terms of making sure that all processes and protocols are in place. The other things that I've mentioned earlier on, we've now required CEOs and board directors for high-risk industries, not just construction, but others as well, to refresh themselves, to be very familiar, and so that accountability is not just at the worker level, but at CEO and board level. So they cannot say that, I didn't know, my safety officer was already, hired to do this, because accountability starts from the top. Within construction sector, one of the key changes we also made in terms of disqualification criteria, for example, was in the past, you only made the contractor and the 2 levels of subcons accountable. Since last year, we've also now made it the contractor and all levels of subcontractors accountable as well. So there is none of this, old business of telling us, this was some subcontractor down the line. I have no sight, no visibility. So you have to be accountable for all the subcontractors down the line. So we have made some measures, apart from just the safety timeouts, that we think, should enhance the safety protocols, procedures in the construction sector, and we work very closely with MND and BCA on this. And I think one aspect would also be how we transform the sector, which I think MND and BCA are playing a very important role in this too, in terms of making our construction processes more productive, more safe. And today you can see many of them performing quite well, and some have gone beyond just video surveillance, but to include video analytics into the surveillance systems, which are able to proactively predict or preempt some of these unsafe things that workers may conduct. So I think overall we have to not just rely on safety timeouts, but I think the whole suite of measures that we introduced last year, and give us time because it has been about 6 months or so for some of these measures, and they need time to permeate and for us to evaluate the effectiveness. So I assure members that we are doing all we can, but I think the measures will also need the industry to also respond and give them time to do so. Thank you.
Thank the SMS for his reply. I agree with the SMS that we must step up our efforts to improve safety in the construction sector. I'd like to ask the SMS if MOM has analysed the profile of the construction companies that caused the unfortunate increase in the workplace fatalities in the second half of 2024. Were these primarily by large projects, large construction projects, or by small, medium-sized projects? Because I recall there was a period of time where there were many subcontractors working within the same work site. And if there's a clear trend, we should double down on our efforts to engage the specific subsector so as to better address the rise in the construction-related work fatalities.
SMS Zaqy.
I thank the member for his question. I don't have the statistics offhand in terms of the mix between large firms and small firms, but I can tell the member that, based on our analysis previous years, not for this particular group, there is a mix in terms of large and small firms do form a significant portion of that number. I think it's about close to half or 1/3. But if you think about it, many of these would have actually been avoided, could have actually been avoided because many of them are A&A type projects, renovation works, some are doing maintenance works, facility management, and these are areas in which we are working with BCA to see how we can encourage and better educate and create better awareness and procedures and protocols among our SMEs. So yes, there are the larger firms, but if you think about risk profile, larger work sites, bigger workforce, but the numbers are overrepresented if you think about ratios in the SME sector. And that's one area in which we are working closely with BCA to try to manage as well.
Thank you, speakers. Two SQs for SMS. I think the first is in relation to the point that he mentioned, I'm not sure whether I heard correctly, about there being a temporary bar from public sector projects should there be a certain violations. So in the context of workplace fatalities, for example, I think we all agree that it's one too many. So would the workplace death, for example, automatically trigger such a certain period of disqualification, and how would these be assessed? The second is in relation to the SnapSafe reports. I think I note in a news article that there was an increase in the number of such workplace safety violations reports. So in terms of the level of resources that the MOM have, is it adequately staffed to ensure that these are properly investigated, and in terms of not just the investigation but the subsequent follow-up to make sure that the rectifications are done to prevent any incidents? Thank you.
To the member's first question on demerit point system, we've enhanced it in the last year or last couple of years, if I recall, and certainly we've brought down the debarment categories in the sense that now, if you, it now covers all GPOs, all public government procurement officers who procure construction work. And I think the debarment point system debars a firm for at least 3 months at 25 points, and that, I think, gets triggered when you have one fatality. So to some extent, if you incur more points, almost like your traffic demerit system, whether it's M1 inspections, finding stop work orders, or other contraventions, even minor injuries, major injuries, I think that adds up to your demerit points. So just to assure member that yes, a fatality will trigger certain responses, and certainly depends on demerit points over an 18-month period, for example, just like your traffic violation systems, it will debar them from public sector contracts. And I would say that, this we think would be effective because the public sector does takes more than half of construction projects in Singapore, and therefore I think that's a big, sizable account for many of our construction firms, especially the larger ones. But as I said, one of the key things we've got to look out for are the small SMEs because they may not rely on public sector works. And typically, like I said, they're overrepresented when we think about some of the A&A renovation projects or even facility management projects that result in fatalities or major injuries. So I think that's one area in which the disqualification criteria may not have happened. That's probably one reason why you find that many of our larger firms tend to do better too.